Welcome, students. We're going to be taking some notes on FDR's first New Deal. We have already completed notes on Great Depression, and now these are the notes on FDR's New Deal. Make sure to title it FDR's first New Deal because we will have another set of notes for FDR's second New Deal. You need to write down that FDR was a Democrat who will win a landslide election against President Hoover. If you remember from previous lessons, we had 3 Republican presidents during the 1920s, and as a result of the 1929 stock market crash, there was a lack of confidence in the Republican Party, and so that gives FDR a landslide victory. Now, FDR, he wins quite a few states, but he does not win, surprisingly, as much popular vote as you would think. Remember that the difference between popular vote and electoral vote is that popular votes are what the country as a whole, the total whole of the population voting for the president. But as a president, you need to win each state. And so the way that it works is that in each state, you need to win a total of 51% or more to win that entire state, and that's the electoral vote. And FDR would win the largest landslide victory to that point. This is important because Democrats will also take control of the House and the Senate. Now, this is significant because if you remember, in the House and Senate, the legislative branch is where laws are created. And then the president in the executive branch has to sign off on those laws, to either veto them or to pass those laws, and to also carry those laws out. So FDR will be able to have a lot of support for his measures during the Great Depression, be able to get much of his first New Deal accomplished. The only thing that will stand in his way is the Supreme Court, which we'll get into on our second New Deal notes. Very important and historic inauguration. I'm going to want you to watch a section of his inauguration and to consider what he asked Congress to do to meet the crisis. I'm going to want you to write down the 3 words that he requests from Congress.
But in the event that the Congress shall fail to take one of these 2 courses, in the event that the national emergency is still critical, I shall not evade the clear course of duty that will then confront me. I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis: broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe. This nation is asking for action, and action now. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance. In every dark hour of our national life, a leadership of frankness and of vigor has met with that understanding and support of the people themselves, which is essential to victory.
So now that you've seen that inauguration clip, you saw that he asked Congress for broad executive power. And that's a very dictatorial way of waging a battle against an enemy, is that broad executive power. He also says the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, which is iconic. That we face our common difficulties, thank God, they concern only material things. So it was really important for him to tackle that idea of fear and to remind the people that the material things that they had lost were inconsequential to their faith in God and their faith in each other. So, what is FDR's first action as president? What starts his New Deal? That would be to reform the banking system. He creates the FDIC to insure America's money by $100,000 per person. You can actually go to your local bank today and see that the FDIC still insures your money. Now it's up to $250,000 because $100,000 isn't as worth as much anymore. But the purpose of him doing that is to build confidence in the banking system, because when the stock market had crashed, banks were not able to give their money back to the people in the quick supply that they had requested it. He also starts to investigate the banks to make sure that the banks are worth insuring and to make sure there's no inappropriate conducts and different regulations being done, and to make sure that he has a firm handle on the banking system. He also does a famous thing called the fireside chats. These fireside chats, they were to ease the fears of Americans. He wanted to explain his policies over the radio to make sure there was public confidence. Because again, remember that the biggest thing that he is fighting is not just simply this insuring of the banks and this public confidence in the banks, but also this overall fear that Americans are experiencing. We will see an example of him in his first fireside chat in regards to the banks. Please make sure to note what he is explaining is the issue of the banks.
My friends, I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking, with which everybody has accepted the inconvenience and the hardships of the banking holiday. And I know that when you understand what we in Washington have been about, I shall continue to have your cooperation as fully as I have had your sympathy and your help during the past week. First of all, let me state the simple fact that when you deposit money in a bank, the bank does not put the money into a safe deposit vault. It invests your money in many different forms of credit, in bonds, in commercial paper, in mortgages, and in many other kinds of loans. In other words, the bank puts your money to work to keep the wheels of industry and of agriculture turning round. A comparatively small part of the money that you put into the bank is kept in currency, an amount which in normal times is wholly sufficient to cover the cash needs of the average citizen. In other words, the total amount of all the currency in the country is only a comparatively small proportion of the total deposits in all the banks of the country. What then happened during the last few days of February and the first few days of March? Because of undermined confidence on the part of the public, there was a general rush by a large portion of our population to turn bank deposits into currency or gold. A rush so great that the soundest banks couldn't get enough currency to meet the demand. The reason for this was that on the spur of the moment, it was of course impossible to sell perfectly sound assets of a bank and convert them into cash except at panic prices far below their real value.
Now that you've seen that audio clip from FDR, you no doubt realize that the banking system was something that Americans didn't understand how it worked. And so he did a good job of explaining that over the radio. This is very similar to our last president that we've had, Barack Obama. He took a playbook from FDR in many different things. When he went into the presidency under a great recession himself, he also decided to give his own weekly addresses, like the fireside chats. FDR is also going to create something called the Brain Trust. He's going to get the best and the brightest minds of the time to advise him on new policies. So he's not just going to be making political decisions, he's going to be making decisions that are really intelligent and the best decisions out there. FDR's most famous thing in his first New Deal is what we call alphabet soup. And these are government programs to help halt the Depression. You're going to need to know what alphabet soup is, so make sure to write that down. Government programs to help halt the Depression. Now, he creates so many different government programs that you're not going to need to write these down. They're all italicized. But he's going to be tackling things for farmers called the AAA, electricity and flood control, TVA, things such as housing, HOLC, business assistance, reform, EBRA, FSA, and such, industrial growth, NRA, and also tons of employment projects like the CCC, CWA, PWA, and FERA. All these different agencies that he creates, there's going to be so many of them that they're going to just bring them down to the acronym and call them alphabet soup. He also does a type of policy called parity. This is where the government guarantees, through financial support, the prices of agriculture to ensure farmers' income by purchasing the supply. Basically, this is decreasing the supply to keep the demand. And if you remember basic economics, the idea is that if you have too much supply, the value is going to be lower. So you want to have the demand to meet the supply. Now the problem is that during the Great Depression, there was way too much supply. The farmers were creating too much product. And so the government would step in, take the product, burn it or bury it, and then pay the farmers. Now, this sounds pretty ridiculous that they would just buy a bunch of hogs and slaughter them and bury them instead of giving them to the poor or to somebody else in another country. But the reason is because they're trying to get rid of the supply to bring the demand to equilibrium. They do this through something called deficit spending. This is the spending of more money than is being received in revenue. And this would be a practice that FDR and Democrats will continue on. Even today, we see some Republicans use this idea of deficit spending, which is a policy that we have become kind of used to in American history, where you don't have a balanced budget, but you just pass on these spendings onto posterity. We're going to watch a short video to kind of highlight what this deficit spending is like.
What can I do for you today?
I would like to raise my debt limit.
Excuse me?
My debt limit, I'd like to raise it.
Because the last time I checked, Mr. Smith, you were in serious debt.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Figure we should raise that limit.
Yeah, it says here you're $140,270 in debt.
Right, so I figured we should raise that limit to about $170,000. I just bought a 60-inch flat screen. Have you ever been to Australia?
No.
Leaving tomorrow, mate. You should check it out. Great parasailing.
Do you have some new income that I don't know about?
No, still making about 21 grand a year.
Okay. And are you still spending $38,000 a year?
If that's what it says.
So you're adding $17,000 a year in debt.
Wow, is that what it comes out to? Debt limit going up. Ding!
Have you made any cuts in your expenses?
Oh, of course, yes. My wife and I cut $380 out of our annual budget. It's $380. It's brutal.
Okay, so you're adding $17,000 a year to your $140,000 in debt, and you cut $380.
Well, you say it like that, it makes it not sound like a lot.
Hey, maybe you should think about generating some new income. Maybe a new job. Maybe ask for that raise.
Oh, asking for that raise, I'm not comfortable. That's an awkward conversation. I've always been able to raise my debt limit.
Yeah, well, this is a little different.
Well, how?
We're in the middle of a recession, and your credit rating will plummet if you continue to go along this path.
I almost had it.
You don't see how bad this is, do you?
I cut my budget by $380. Are you kidding?
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. We can't help you.
Just a little, like...
I'm very sorry.
My wife is going to lose it.
Been there.
I mean, $380 was bad enough. I mean, this is going to end our marriage. We stopped talking to each other for a month. The baby was totally freaked out.
Wait, you have kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sign there.
All right. Aren't kids a blessing? I mean, she's got plenty of time to deal with all this, right?
Absolutely.
Are we all set?
You're all set.
All right. Let's go, kiddo. We got to meet Mommy at the car store. Here we go. I think this is yours.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thanks. Hey!
So in times of crisis, maybe deficit spending is okay, but if we become familiar with deficit spending and using deficit spending all the time, then the people who inherit the deficits are posterity or people of future generations. So we're still paying off the Great Depression, even though now we're paying off our Great Recession that we went through as well. We have no hope to pay everything off. It's pretty sad. And last thing for today, we have Social Security. Social Security is more than a number, but that's what you no doubt know Social Security as. Social Security is a national mandatory retirement plan, and that's why we came up with a digit for your retirement plan. Now, this retirement plan was to help out people when they were 65 years of age and couldn't work anymore. The life expectancy was a lot lower back then, so it was to help you out in your last few days of life. We went through a different Western point of view where it would be the government to protect and supply for the elderly instead of families. And so this Social Security program was a mandatory retirement plan. Now, this mandatory retirement plan today is not enough to simply retire on, but it was something that worked back then. Today, you need a lot more than just this Social Security mandatory retirement plan. That's why a lot of your parents have different retirement plans, CDs and 401ks and pensions and things of that nature, because retirement is very costly. So that's the end of the first New Deal. We will be taking notes on the second New Deal in a different slide, different presentation. So make sure that you review through your notes, create a one-sentence summary at the end, and be prepared to share.